Hi folks, welcome to this video on types of feedback. Feedback is one of the section B question 7 essay topics, but you might get a little short answer question on feedback at some point in questions 3 and 4 in the exam, but this is about the essay side of things. So as you can see, there are lots of different types of feedback, as we've put on here. What we're going to do now is just basically go through a definition of each one. Okay, so negative feedback, as you might expect, people go criticism. You're commenting on faults in technique, faults in tactical performance. That's what you're trying to identify and correct with negative feedback. In contrast to that, then we've got positive feedback, which is comments on successful technique. Most obvious example of that is stuff like praise, saying when you've done something well, and that's going to, increase the likelihood of it happening again. Intrinsic feedback is feedback from within. We've all experienced that, those times when you've done something and it's felt right and it's looked right and you've known before anyone said anything that that skill was executed well. Equally, I bet we've all done something where we've struck a ball or hit something and we've turned away and discussed before we've even seen where it's gone because we knew it didn't feel right, it didn't sound right, okay? And that's our intrinsic feedback telling us that it was successful or unsuccessful. Extrinsic feedback then, feedback from an outside source. Again, so that's going to come from a coach, a teammate, family, friends, okay, watching your performances. Coming down to the bottom corner, concurrent feedback is feedback during a performance. So your coach talking to you from the touchline or talking to you whilst the drill is taking place and giving you opportunity to act on that feedback straight away. And so terminal feedback is feedback that you receive at the end of a performance or the end of a session. So you've just finished your session, the coach gathers you all in after you cool down and says, right, here's what I thought. Okay, so those two are kind of opposites to each other. Leaves us with the last two, and some people struggle with these last two, so hopefully I'll explain them okay for you. Knowledge of performance is basically feedback that focuses on technique. What was your performance like? What was it correct? Was it incorrect? Whereas knowledge of results is, was the end result correct? Now, here's where I think where people struggle with. Surely if your performance is right, your result's going to be right. Well, not always the case. How many times do you do something really, really well and you still lose, or you still miss, or it still doesn't go in? How many times has someone scored a goal where it's dripped off the shin? They've toe poked it because they haven't used the correct technique, but it's still gone in. So sometimes we'll get the right result, but with an incorrect technique or an incorrect performance. And very often we won't get the right result, even though performance is of a high standard. What I think you can say about both these two is knowledge of performance. Was your technique right? You very often have to use a bit of extrinsic feedback there. Did it look right from a coach's point of view, from a teammate's point of view? Whereas the results, you know yourself whether it's gone in or not. So that can be a little bit more intrinsic. So I think those two are often linked together, and it sometimes makes a little bit more sense to think of them in that respect. Now, as far as feedback goes, that's pretty much it. The 2 times it's been up as an essay topic, it's been very, very generous. They've basically said the types of feedback that a coach can use, right? Now that's them there. And remember, if you're trying to make 7 or 8 points on each half of the essay, if you mention each of these, you've cracked it. They're going away from that now. They're not being as generous on these essay topics, okay? Here's what they might do. I've got no indication that this is true. This is just a hunch. But here's what they might be doing if this comes up as an essay topic in the future. They could do something like this. How are you going to make feedback effective? They could say how are you going to give effective feedback? And here's what they could do. And again, I've got no indication that they're going to do this. But here's what they could do to make it a little bit tricky for you. Okay? They could say, how are you going to make feedback effective for a cognitive performer or a beginner? Remember, that's proper name for a beginner, or an autonomous performer, or an experienced athlete. Okay? They could do something like that. In which case, we've got to use and think about all the different types of feedback and then go, right, which ones would be best, for example, for a cognitive performer? Well, let's have a quick think about that. If I'm working with a group of beginners and I want to make that feedback effective, I'm going to have to give them loads of extrinsic feedback. The beginners, they don't know how it should feel. So they're not going to be able to use intrinsic feedback. So they're going to be very, very dependent on me giving them extrinsic feedback as their coach. I'm going to have to give them lots of feedback during their performance. Let them know how it's going. Let them know what they're doing right. Let them know what they're doing wrong. Let them know how to improve. I'm also going to have to give them bucket loads of feedback at the end, so they know exactly how well they did and exactly what they need to do at the start of the next session. Even though, and here's the weird one, even though they are beginners and even though they're probably getting it wrong more than they are getting it right, I'm going to have to give them lots of positive feedback, lots of encouragement, lots of praise. That was brilliant. Well done. Oh, nearly so close. It's going to have to be a lot of that. If I give them loads of negative, they're not going to come back next week. And we're not going to make a regular performer out of them. I'm also going to have to give them lots of knowledge of results, because they're probably, as beginners, not going to know what the results should be. Should it have gone there? Should it have gone that high? Should it have gone at that angle? Okay, so that's what they're going to need a lot of from me as well. And also they're going to need lots of knowledge of performance. Did it look right? Okay, did they bring the leg back far enough? Did their arms follow through enough? Things like that. When it comes to an autonomous learner, an experienced performer, okay, I'm definitely going to know that they can rely more on intrinsic feedback. They're experienced, they know how it should feel. They're not going to need me pointing out everything to them. They know if they've got it right, they know if they've got it wrong. Equally, I think my concurrent feedback is going to reduce a little bit. They're just going to need a little bit more feedback at the end. Because of that intrinsic feedback, because they can self-correct and self-feedback, they're not going to need as much feedback from me during performance, because they can make corrections themselves. They might need me to sum a few things up at the end of each drill or the end of each training session. Equally, again, even though they're autonomous and they're probably more likely getting it right than they are wrong, I can afford to give them more negative feedback, because we're critiquing performance now. We're trying to make those final small percentage improvements, so they're going to need a little bit more negative feedback from me. And finally, they know what the results should be. They know where it should go. They know what it should do. Okay, so they're going to need a little bit more on performance, but not as much on knowledge of results. Do I know that that's where they're going with the essay question? No, I don't. But what I do know is they are getting a little bit tighter on it. If you look at the essays early days compared to the more recent ones, they've gone down a certain route. It used to be, tell us about command style of teaching, for example. More recently, it's been, just tell us about the disadvantages of command style of teaching. We've had lots of essay questions on, tell us about feedback. So what they're probably doing now is they're going to say, right, tell us about the types of feedback you would use with this performer, or potentially with this kind of skill. You've just got to know the definitions and then use your common sense. And the point is this: if you think something is correct, put it down. They don't do negative marking. They're not going to take marks away. So you're not losing any marks by putting things down that are going to be incorrect. But what you are doing is missing the opportunity if you don't put them down. An answer is always got more chance of scoring a mark than no answer at all. So if you think it should be put down, you put it down, okay? Hope you found this video effective, folks. Watch it as many times as you like. Make sure you know these definitions, and good luck.